Hello and welcome to the Evolution of Horror podcast. My name is Mike Muncer. As ever, I am your host. Now, in this podcast, usually we look back at the history and the evolution of the horror genre, one subgenre at a time. Our last season, focusing on the Nature Bites Back subgenre, ended a few months ago, and we'll be back in the summer for our next season, focusing on man-made monsters. That's going to be kicking off in July 2025. But this week, we've got something a little bit special for you because it's Final Destination week. The new Final Destination movie, that's called Final Destination Bloodlines, is out this week in cinemas everywhere. And so, to celebrate that, I'm going to be releasing some episodes from the Patreon back catalogue. 2 years ago, in 2023, I did a Final Destination retrospective where I discussed in depth all 5 Final Destination movies with various brilliant guests. So I thought, to celebrate the release of the new movie, I would drop these episodes throughout the week. So every day this week, you're going to hear a new episode in our Final Destination retrospective. You're also going to hear the interview that I did a couple of years ago with the Final Destination creator, Jeffrey Reddick. That's going to be dropping later this week as well. And then we're going to finish with a brand new episode on Friday discussing Final Destination Bloodlines in spoilerific detail. So all of that's to come. So here comes part 1. I was joined back in 2023 by friend of the pod and 90s horror aficionado Joshua Tonks to discuss Final Destination from 2000 in spoilerific detail. Enjoy.
I got this feeling. This weird feeling. The cabin starts to shake, right? And the left side blows up, and then the whole plane just explodes. The plane's gonna explode! It's not a joke! It's not a joke!
We get thrown off the plane all because Brownie has a bad dream?
I saw it.
The plane! It's gonna blow up! It's gonna blow up!
Hello, Josh Tonks.
Hi, Mike Muncer. How are you?
I am very good. How are you?
Yes, good. Not bad, not bad. It's been a bright and breezy rewatch of this movie that we're going to be talking about today because I forgot that I hadn't seen it in a minute.
I love that. So you rewatched this film at what time this morning?
It's 11 o'clock now, and so I watched it at 9 a.m. Yeah.
Lovely. It's a lovely 9 a.m. watch, to be fair.
Great way to start the day. It's impending death.
Oh, beautiful. So yeah, we're going to be talking about the first Final Destination over the next few months. I'm going to be watching all 5 Final Destination films. What is your kind of history with this franchise, Josh? Are you a fan of the series generally?
Yeah, so I obviously watched the first one because it was sort of in that whole period of post-Scream teen horror that came out from sort of like between 96 to 2002. It was like that peak era. So I watched this first one on repeat constantly. But then I was a little bit of a snob in my teenage years and kind of didn't really do sequels. Or if I did sequels, it had to have people in that were in the first one. So I maybe watched number 2 and didn't really revisit these films until after the 5th one came out, and sort of went back and saw 3 and 4. And they're fine. That you get what you get with these movies. I think they're a nice sort of they're like a sort of a perfect mashup between Saw and Elm Street. Like you kind of get the imagination of Elm Street, but not quite as much, and you get the cool, exciting deaths of Saw, but it's not so morose. You know what I mean? You get that sort of in between, I find.
Yeah, that's quite a nice way to put it, actually, because it's sort of a hard one to lump into a particular subgenre or even era, because it runs through the 2000s, but it feels kind of 90s to me, I think, this franchise, in a way, you know? It doesn't feel... Like, you're right, I guess Saw is quite a good kind of junction point between the 90s horror and the kind of Saw, post-Saw horror, in a way.
Yeah, because the sequels all become about how interesting the kills and the deaths are, and that's sort of what Saw is, and it's what the later Elm Street films become as well. It's like, how creative can we kill people? And sort of Final Destination sort of hits right in the middle tonally, I think, with both of those franchises.
I think, I do find this whole series in general pretty consistent. I mean, we've been talking a lot recently about how Scream is definitely the most consistent kind of horror franchise out there in terms of its quality across 6 movies. But Final Destination is sort of up there for me as well, maybe running in a close second or third place, sort of around that sort of, you know, maybe the Chucky films as well are kind of up there, but it's a pretty consistent franchise in that regard.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I think it's because it doesn't really fuck about with the way they're made. They're all the same. Yeah. They're all absolutely the same. So aside from picking like what cool death, you know, you don't really come back for the characters necessarily. You sort of come back for the sort of the wacky ways that everyone can be offed.
So true. Yeah, it's so true. And we'll get into that with this movie as to how much do we care / how much are we supposed to care, I suppose, about the characters, about the story compared to everything else. So let's get into it. So we'll go back. So we're just going to talk about the original this week. So Final Destination from 2000. Josh, give us a brief little plot synopsis of Final Destination.
Yeah, so Final Destination follows a group of school kids and their teachers. They're about to take a flight to Paris when our sort of main character Alex has a vision of the plane crashing, and in sort of all the excitement and terror, a few of them get kicked off the plane basically, and then the plane actually explodes and kills everyone on board, and we get a bit of time sort of seeing our few survivors sort of dealing with the ramifications of that, and they're talking to the police, and you know, is Alex involved, was he not? But Alex soon starts to realize that, you know, maybe they were supposed to die on the plane, and death starts to follow them and pick them off one by one.
Indeed. So tell me, so did you see this film sort of back in the day when it first came out? What's your sort of history with it?
Yeah, I did. I absolutely saw it back in the day. I had it on VHS and then I had it on DVD.
Yeah.
And I really liked it. I think it was one of the films of its time where it was very sort of dependent on the cast, and I really liked Sean William Scott from American Pie.
Yes.
And I liked Kerr Smith from Dawson's Creek, and so, well, of course I'm going to watch this film, you know,
yeah,
because it had the actors that were in sort of TV and film that I was interested in.
Yeah, and I remember seeing adverts for it and being very excited about it. I would have been, 13 when this came out, and I think it would. Do you remember the sort of marketing for it had a lot of like shots of audiences screaming and gasping,
yes,
and they made it look like, oh, this is going to be really fucking terrifying. And I remember being very, very excited for this movie for that reason. This is going to be like the new Scream in terms of a new, truly terrifying teen horror movie as well.
Yeah.
It wasn't quite that, but...
Far from it, yeah.
It wasn't quite that. However, when I finally... Because I wasn't old enough to see it in the cinema, but I saw it on, I think, VHS, and I loved it as well. And I think... Then going forward, and I'll talk about this when I talk about the sequels, but I think I watched all the rest of them in the cinema, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and they were all really fun, vocal cinema audience experiences. You know, like they are the sorts of films where people laugh and they gasp and they scream, and it's not because it's frightening as such, right? But just because it's really fun and often quite unexpected in the way people get offed or whatever.
Yeah.
You know, I guess that's the fun of these films. Mostly.
And what's really interesting watching it now, based on watching it then, and how you're sort of, I guess you're just sort of, you grow up and your intelligence shifts, or you see so many more films and your taste changes. But I remember watching it at the time and I thought this film was so sophisticated and so clever and, you know, all the little Easter eggs that are in there and all the little predictions about you know, the foreboding and what's going to happen. I mean, it's so heavy-handed, isn't it? Like, but I thought it was so smart and so cool and so clever, like what they were doing. But it's not bad. It's just really fun, like, and really entertaining.
It's really fun. And that's the thing, like, it's made for teens, right? It's made for a teen audience, and when you're a teenager, you do think this film is fucking cool and smart and scary and exciting and everything else. So it works in that regard, doesn't it? And it was a huge hit. Like, because let's talk about where this was sort of placed. You mentioned this already. Obviously, we had Scream in 96, and then we had that wave of kind of Scream-esque horror films. This sort of came at the end of that, really, didn't it? And, you know, some of these other films that we'd had in this wave, Urban Legend or I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, they weren't massive commercial hits in the way that it feels like Final Destination was, right? In some ways, this movie, it feels like a bit of an anomaly plonked in this kind of weird area of teen horror.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember at the time hearing the term sleeper hit for the first time, and it was I didn't know what that meant, and it was that Final Destination was a bit of a surprise hit.
Right.
And it's interesting because, you know, The Sixth Sense had already come out, and so that was the new thing, and teen horror was sort of almost dead, and we got the last sort of gasps of it. But this one was doing something different, and even though they're very different, you see how quickly the slasher movie, it burns bright and fast. You know, we saw it in the early 80s, and by the time we got to 81, it was already dead, and it took Elm Street to bring it back with a new sort of supernatural twist, and then it was dead again by 88, and then Scream had to bring it back in 96. By 98, you know, the postmodern teen slasher was already kind of like wavering in quality. And then you start to see the little twists on it, which is what this one's doing. In the same way that sort of Cherry Falls is doing, let's kill the virgin rather than have the virgin survive. Final Destination is like, okay, let's do a teen slasher where characters are getting picked off one by one, but what if it's not a physical person? What if it's death itself? And I think that's probably why it was sort of so successful. And also, I think just the way that people get killed is so fun and interesting. It's not a person with a knife, it's home appliances, and it's electricity, and it's buses, and all that kind of stuff.
Yes, I think you're so right with the Elm Street comparison, really, because it did that same thing, didn't it? Like you said, in the early 80s, when the slasher was as good as dead and people were sick of a man with a knife and a mask, Wes Craven created a new way to make a slasher more imaginative. And I guess that's exactly what these guys have done here. It's interesting that, like, there's a quote from James Wong, the director, where he talks about it, and he says, one thing we were all in agreement on from the start is that we didn't want to do a slasher movie. I became very excited when we decided to make the world at large in the service of death our antagonist. Everyday objects and occurrences take on ominous proportions, and it becomes less about whether or not our characters are going to die and more about how they will die and how they can delay their deaths. Which is, I mean, that does sound more like he's describing a slasher movie to me, but he's sort of adamant it's not a slasher movie. But I get what he's saying. I guess it's not a man and a knife in this instance, is it?
And in this one in particular, this first one, because it hasn't found its groove yet as a franchise, and doesn't quite know what the audiences want from it, you can see them trying to make it not a slasher movie, because there's a lot of, you know, somewhat pretentious conversations about death, which sort of in hindsight are a little bit amusing and add to a somewhat camp element to the film. And just the way the characters interact with each other in between the really cool set pieces. They play it pretty straight to begin with. You know, the initial, the initial sort of response to the plane crash, like they take their time to get to the kills. Yes. And deal with it sort of in real time and try and give it some actual depth and emotion. And I think that's why a lot of people that I've spoken to kind of prefer 2 and 3 or 5. Yeah. That, you know, they've all got their favorite. This one doesn't seem to be anyone's favorite, and I think it's because they're sort of playing it a bit more serious. Yeah, in this
you're
one.
Right. I think it's Final Destination 2 when the series figures out what it is, I think, like as a franchise, whereas you're right
with that opening scene.
Unbelievable. But this movie has some amazing moments, and you're right, particularly in that first act with the plane crash, it does play it straight. And the dialogue, it's that kind of post Kevin Williamson dialogue. It takes itself very seriously. It's like, but it's not Kevin Williamson, right? It's not quite as smart as Kevin Williamson, but it's got that earnest teenagers talking like they're grown adults,
45 years old. It's the hyper articulate Dawson's Creek, very earnest, but not with the sort of wit and scream sort of banter and references. You know what I mean? It eliminates that one element, and so it does sort of feel a little Dawson's Creek.
Not to mention the fact that it has Kerr Smith as well in this movie, who I want to talk about because what the hell is going on with this guy?
I really want to talk about him.
Well, maybe we should start by talking about the characters. Let's do it because, like you said, kind of a sort of all-star teen cast for the time, right? For its target audience. Devon. Now, how do I pronounce Devon's surname? I always forget. Is it Sauer?
I think it's Sauer. Devon Sauer. Yeah.
Devon Sauer. What do you think of him as our protagonist, as Alex Browning?
Well, having just watched Idle Hands for the first time.
I can't believe it was the first time you'd seen it. Oh my God.
Right?
Yeah.
And messaging you being like, he's so fit in this movie. Like, he's sort of like this grubby stoner, and I'm really liking the bangs, the fringe and all of that. He looks a bit rough in this one, I must say.
I know.
Doesn't look great.
Well, he looks more like a teenage boy.
A teenager.
He's got teenager skin. He's got too much gel in his hair. He's awkward. He's a bit gangly. I mean, he looks like
one of the in-betweeners.
Yes, he looks like a proper teenager, doesn't he? Which I sort of appreciate in a way.
But he's great.
Yeah.
I think he does really well. But again, having seen Idle Hands, he gives such an incredible performance in that movie. And in this one, he's fine.
Yeah.
Because with a lot of the characters in this, there's more to do with the plot and what's happening than the actual character development, I find.
Yeah. He does a lot of this. I saw it, and I can intervene, and I saw it. He does a lot of hand waving around, but he's good
in his hoodie.
Yeah. He's one of those teen stars whose career sort of went a bit quiet after this boom of teen movies, didn't it? Really, but he sort of made a bit of a comeback in like the Chucky TV show and stuff like that, hasn't he? But he's definitely one of those people that I very much associate with this era, I suppose.
Yeah, because he was such a little heartthrob in things like Casper and Is It Now and Then or stuff, like that. And then I think it was drugs and alcohol. I think it was addiction issues, which is why he's not back for Final Destination 2. If I remember correctly, I think I read an article or he tweeted about it not too long ago. And so I think that's why we had that little dip.
Interesting.
And maybe the cracks were beginning to show here.
Yeah, that's and he was also a thing that a lot of people might recognize him for as well is that he was in the Eminem Stan music video as well as Stan. Like I remember that so clearly as well, with his bleached blonde hair. What about Kerr Smith then? Like you said, like I remember him having at the time, right, controversial Dawson's Creek storyline where he was gay and there was that whole coming out storyline and everything, right? Playing slightly different type of character here as Carter. What is going on with Carter?
Yeah, I mean, it's infuriating actually because he was the person that I wanted to see this movie for. And especially Jack McPhee in Dawson's Creek, for me personally, being such a pivotal, important character on television. Probably the first, gay representation I ever saw. Mm-hmm. And, I used to, scour the internet for the Dawson's Creek scripts and see if I could find Jack scenes to see if there was anything gay that happened, because that just wasn't anywhere else. There was nothing available or out there for me to watch, especially as a sort of 12, 13-year-old. Yeah. And so I was gutted in this movie to see him play it. Fine for him to be playing straight, fine for him to be playing a jock, but he's such an angry, hateful character seemingly out of nowhere, and I couldn't help but feel that might have been the actor intentionally going like, no, I can do different, I'm very not gay, I'm the opposite of gay, you know what I mean? Because Jack's so sensitive. So yeah, I was just a bit annoyed and gutted with his character because he's so angry.
It's weird. I think there's some weird casting here. Because I almost feel like Sean William Scott could have played that jockey, broy, dickish kind of character, right? Like, I don't know. It feels like they're both trying to play against type in this. Sean William Scott is playing like, sort of friendly, slightly bumbly kind of, douchebag. And yeah, you're right. Kerr Smith as Carter. Carter's got some serious anger issues in this film. Like he needs to be in therapy big time, this kid.
He does. And his poor girlfriend, who barely says two lines, just gets dragged around with him. She's just with him all the time. It's a shame. And I can see getting to the end of the film, like he's one of our sort of survivors as well.
Yeah.
And that must have been so annoying for audiences, like really wanting him to die and then he survives.
Well, it was really weird because he does a complete 180 at the end as well. Carter's all friendly and smiley and having a drink with the other two. And he I mean, hate is almost not strong enough for how I think he feels about Alex throughout this whole film. We don't really understand why. What's their backstory, these two? But all we know is Carter and Alex fucking hate each other. And Carter, just every chance he gets, he wants to punch his lights out. And it's like, what is going on with these two?
Yeah, he does a U-turn on the high street and causes a traffic accident just so he can give Alex a bit of shit. It's like, what are you doing?
I think he's in love with him, really. I think that's what's going on.
Maybe it is under the surface.
When they're at the funeral of, like, you know, the 30 kids that have been tragically killed, and we cut to a shot of Carter, all he's doing is looking across at Alex the entire time. I'm like, dude, what's
and it's
going on here?
They sort of try and allude in the dialogue that he's very controlling, and he doesn't like the idea that Alex, you know, in some way has a control over his destiny and his fate. Which is, again, the script, you know, leaning into these more sort of existential ideas, but doesn't really have the time, because it's a 90-minute movie. It sort of rattles through. It doesn't really have the time to deal with those issues, I guess.
No.
So it just sort of comes across that he's just a big old angry boots, you know?
I think that's what it is about this film, is that it takes itself very seriously, and I think it wants to be a bit deep and profound.
Yeah.
But none of the characters are really written well enough for that to be the case. Like, they are all just they're almost like your 80s teen movie archetypes, aren't they, really?
A little bit.
And Ali Larter is Clear Rivers. Again, like, what can you say about Clear other than that she's just the kind of, like, quiet, floaty, I don't know,
She's
but
so
also
wanky,
is really
isn't
good
she?
with yeah, exactly. But also is really good with a, like, blowtorch or whatever it is she's doing.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
Like, what?
It's that
What's
she's
going on
all
there?
that, like, I'm the edgy alt girl, except I'm one of the most beautiful actresses of my generation, and I've just been given, like, choppy bangs and been made a brunette. Because you see her at the end, and she's got this, like, blonde blowout and looks amazing. You're like, oh my God.
I know.
Yes.
Yeah, and there's a kind of, and we'll talk about the alternate ending and deleted scenes maybe at the end, but there is a sort of romance between her and Alex as well, which again is pretty thinly drawn, isn't it?
It is, which is very much a 90s thing of being, for the most part, these teen movies were incredibly sexless.
Yes.
You know, there was never any nudity, there was never any real sort of romance happening. And if there was, it was never sexual in any way. And that's sort of, you know, what's happening here, really. They all feel very asexual, all the characters.
Completely, yeah. And you do think, like, what does Carter's girlfriend see in him as well? Absolute nightmare. But yeah, these kids, I mean, there's almost no point in talking about the other characters beyond those three, because,
well,
you know.
I do love Todd.
Oh, Todd, yeah, the
Todd.
best friends. Yeah,
Yeah.
do you know what? He sort of gets more character, and he gets the least screen time out of all of them, doesn't he? Because he's the first death. But you're right, you know,
We get, I mean, sidebar, there's a lot of shitting in this movie. There's a
There
lot
is.
of, like,
There's a
lads
lot
on
of
the toilet.
Yeah.
And it's not even played for humour. It's just, no, do you want to go have a shit with me? Because I don't want to have a shit on a plane. And have the cute girls, like, smell my shit. Like, it's really, like, it's
very strange.
Really strange. But it's quite, what it feels like, actually, is at the beginning of the film, the characters, particularly those two, Alex and Todd, feel younger than the actors.
Yes.
They feel about 14, 15 almost, in the way that they are, you know, their parents are like, right, you're off and you're going on this trip and, you know, you go, son.
Yeah.
And their relationship's really sweet. And at the funeral as well, when they're sort of next to each other and they say, you know, they're not, you know, gonna fix up a cabin on Brokeback Mountain, but, like, they're gonna go and, like, go on a holiday together and go on a trip together once, you know, Todd's dad gets over his son and Todd's brother dying on the plane. You know, we have these sweet moments between them, and I actually think that Todd's death is the most brutal and sad and heart-wrenching of all of them, because he's a character that you think's probably going to stick around a little longer because he's so close to Alex, but he goes first, and in a way that's so they build up the deaths in this, which I quite like. And this first one is just, aside from, like, the water following up, chasing him through the bathroom, that just him getting garroted by a fishing line, a washing line, is so, like, mundane and scary.
Yeah, it is mundane. Yeah, I think you're right. There is something, again, like quite different to the sorts of kills that we get in the rest of the film and the rest of the series, I think, that first one as well, because it is very mundane, it is very everyday. You're right, yeah. He is good, and I like that they've got this kind of close friendship. I think it's funny when they talk at the funeral. It's a very sweet moment, but I love how he goes, don't take this the wrong way.
Oh, God, yeah, I rolled my eyes.
Say, yeah, it's still got the early 2000s kind of
hashtag no homo. Oh,
yeah.
Fucking hell.
But fair enough, that's how teenage boys interacted back then, you know. Doesn't mean anything, but I miss you. Yeah.
Gross. Get over it.
Let me, this is a thing that you pointed out to me, just going back to the characters for a second, that all of the characters in this have surnames that are like horror directors or people in horror, right? Which I love. So obviously we've got Alex Browning. Clear Rivers, though. Who's Rivers?
I looked this up. Apparently Rivers was a producer on the film, I think. Immediately forgot the moment I looked it up.
Okay, that makes sense.
Clear was
right.
And Rivers is something else. But yeah, that character is someone that they knew.
Agent Shrek and Agent Viner from the FBI, obviously Nosferatu, kind of early cinema references there. You've got the teacher who's literally called Val Luton, which I love.
Valerie Luton, yeah.
You got Todd. Sean William Scott's is maybe the most heinous. It's just Billy Hitchcock.
Yeah.
I love it.
We've got Cheney as well, haven't we, somewhere?
Yeah, Terry Cheney is Carter's girlfriend. Yeah, I love it. I mean, I would have had no idea of that back when I was like 13 and watched this for the first time. Which I
love. I actually like it because they're like proper niche.
Yeah.
It's not like, you know, nowadays.
Well, now we have like Tara Carpenter.
Yeah. But even in Scream 3, when it's like Angelina Tyler, Jennifer Jolie, Tom Prince. It's like we're going to take the biggest actors and just splice their names together. It's so silly.
It's so true. Yeah, you're right. And I don't think I would have even thought about it apart from maybe Val Luton, the teacher, and Billy Hitchcock. And also Billy.
Yeah.
Billy must be the most used first name in the slasher subgenre of all time, right?
Or just American movies.
Yeah.
If there's a young boy, he's going to be called Billy or Jimmy.
Yeah, so true. So the series was created by Jeffrey Reddick, right? And originally it began as a spec script for an X-Files episode, which I found interesting reading about. That like originally this was an idea for an X-Files episode, and then it was New Line Cinema that kind of persuaded them to turn it into a feature film. And then James Wong, the director, was one of the X-Files kind of staff writer and directors, and kind of jumped. So I never realised that until reading up about it, that it has this kind of X-Files origin. But that sort of makes sense, right? This kind of really very high concept supernatural story. Yeah.
Especially when you've got the FBI agents in the film as well, that sort of don't amount to much aside from chasing Alex around a bit. They don't really do anything. But I think that's another one of the things that sort of leans this trying to lean it away from slasher in a way, you know, and that it's like, no, this is more of this is a thriller, you know, and you can see the dichotomy there because New Line are producing, you know, we get the decapitations and we get the action sequences, but then we also get FBI. We've got the sort of the very 2000s opening credits. We've got all the quite interesting in Act 1, all the little Easter eggs that sort of show that something's going to happen with Flight 180, you know, the ticket and the bag and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're so right. So I love that. Anyway, let's get into the meat of this then. And we've got to start by talking about that plane crash. You know, again, it's kind of interesting that this movie came out pre 9/11 as well, like a year before 9/11. I wonder how differently it might have been received had it been released even a year later, or if it would have been delayed.
Wouldn't have come out.
Yeah.
It would have been delayed. 100% it would have been delayed.
Yeah. So interesting.
That wouldn't have made it out. It would have probably got a straight to DVD release 3 years later or something. Yeah. No way that would have come out after 9/11 at all.
It is. I think this is one of the best things about this movie. I think these are the best sequences in this franchise generally, are the big tragic accidents that happen in the opening sequences, right? They're always amazing. This plane crash, what do you think of it and the way it's executed?
It's really good, and they did a lot of it practically, which is really cool as well.
Ooh, I love that.
You know, I think they obviously built the interior of a plane, and the people getting pulled out the sides, you know, it's all happening, which is excellent.
Yeah.
Does it scare you? Did it make you, you know, ooh, can I get on a flight?
A little bit. I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm like a terrified flyer, but it does always cross my mind a little bit. Like whenever I think of whenever I experience like some heavy turbulence on a flight or anything like that.
Yeah,
I do think a little bit about Final Destination and those moments. You know, I think it is a very effective thing. I think we all have thought about those sorts of things happening when we go on
for sure.
A plane, particularly, but all kinds of public transport. And I think,
don't get started on trains, Mike. Don't go there. Don't even go there.
I've got a train sequence to talk about later. I can't wait. But you know, oh my God, the second one particularly, I think, is the one that really stays in everyone's mind, doesn't it? But I do think that this is realised in quite an effective and scary way. Not scary in the kind of horror jump scare way, but scary in the quite disturbing. Oh, is this what being in a plane crash would actually look and feel like? You know, it is, yeah, and it's quite effective in that way.
Yes. It's funny with a lot of the things in these movies because they're so outside of our control. Like a plane crash there's nothing you can really do about it.
No.
And so things like that don't scare me. I'm like, okay, fine, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But it is executed in a way that's really shocking, especially, you know, when you're seeing your main characters. Because you don't, like, if you hadn't seen the trailer or you don't know that the plane crash isn't going to just be a premonition, you're looking at like your main character's flesh get like melted away from his face.
Yes.
That always stuck with me for sure, that one shot.
Yeah, it's so true actually. If you didn't know where this film was going, you'd maybe think that you were in some sort of Drew Barrymore, Janet Leigh situation where it's like, oh, all these characters we've just spent time with are now dead, which is kind of interesting. But yeah, you're right. You know, the sequences of it's the panic and, you know, the mass kind of panic followed by the chairs flying out of the plane and disappearing, followed by that flame coming through. And this would be the worst way to die. I think I'd rather just be sucked out and fall than be poor Alex and have his face kind of slowly melted away in fire. Like, it's pretty grim, isn't it?
It is. And even like when you see it after the premonition, when you see the plane explode, it looks so quick.
It does.
But we know that we've seen inside it and seen what happens. But I love the moment where there's the delay, where the plane explodes and then the glass in the airport shatters just like a moment later. I just think that's so cool.
It's a really powerful image, that image. Like, that's the one that really stays with me more than anything. That image of the glass smashing. Yeah, it's so good, isn't it? And I love all those little moments leading up to it. The little signs, you know, like you say, that whatever music might be playing, and then the little details that prove to him that his vision is really happening, like the little fold down tray, you know, thing coming off in his hands and all that stuff. Like, I think, again, the films they have so much fun with those sort of little details and omens and that kind of thing, don't they?
Yeah, and it doesn't pull its punches as well, because, you know, we see that there was a you know, a differently abled person and a baby on that flight as well that they point out. And when I saw that at first, I was like, are we about to get an awkward, you know, of its time joke at the expense of someone?
Yes.
But actually it isn't. It's like, no God would be that cruel, and then ultimately they are.
Yeah, it's true.
So it's kind of heavy.
It's pretty dark, actually, thinking about it, isn't it? Yeah, you're right.
Like that they actively point that out.
Yeah, you'd have to be a fucked up god. That's the theme of this movie, that there is a fucked up god. I mean, that is kind of the theme of this movie in a way. Some sort of higher power coming for everyone. Yeah.
And is that higher power perhaps Tony Todd?
Yeah.
Do you think?
Tony Todd, he's an interesting one in this, isn't he? He's kind of like, what is he? He's a sort of harbinger. He comes in to kind of explain the plot to us a little bit, but also, is there more to him than that? Is he?
Because I know there were some theories where people think he's deaf and he's doing this.
Yeah.
I've never thought that, and it's on the audio commentary.
Right.
If you look where he's coming from, You know, as he enters the scene, it looks like he's coming out of some hell cave.
Yes.
Just to the right of the screen is like this like dark, shadowy, cave-like, glowy place, and you're like,
Yes.
where are you coming from, sir?
Yeah, like he's literally walked out of the flames of hell, right? That's interesting, isn't it? And he's in a few of the films, isn't he? I don't know if he's in all 5, but he's in a few of them.
I think he's in 2 and 5.
Right. And he definitely, like, he has that kind of narrative reason to be in the story.
He gets all the trailer lines, doesn't he?
Gets all the trailer lines. Obviously, it's a fun it's a 90s-esque fun cameo of a horror royalty popping in. But you're right, maybe there's also more to it than that. Maybe he is the one doing all this to everyone. He does seem to take great glee in telling them all they're about to die, basically.
Yes.
We do get that kind of like longer than usual sequence of just all of them dealing with the aftermath of the plane crash, right, before all the deaths and everything happen, from like all of them being interviewed by the FBI to the funeral to kind of seeing how they're all dealing with it, with going home to their parents. Again, like, how do you think all of that stuff is handled? The more kind of emotional element, I suppose, to this story.
I think it's all right. I think it's a tricky one to do. Like, it has to be there, otherwise the film would read as really unrealistic and almost dumb. But they can't go too far into that, because, to be honest, this happening, you know, this whole incident, this first act would be the first 30 minutes of a TV series.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
then we would get to know every character, and we'd be investigating their lives and how they're feeling. We can't really do that in a 90-minute teen horror movie.
Yeah.
And so some of it, I appreciate that it's there, but some of it doesn't quite have the emotional weight that I think is warranted for something of that magnitude happening. Mm-hmm. They, you know, the scene after Todd dies, you know, there's quite a sort of there's an exchange between Alex and Todd's father, and it doesn't feel as like racked with emotion as it could be. You know what I mean? It feels a little flat.
Yes.
And I think it's just because it's not that type of movie. It's not what people are here to watch. It's too intense for the audience that are, you know, the target audience, basically.
Yeah,
I'm glad that it's all there.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting, isn't it? It's a kind of interesting choice to make it that, because it's a very sad thing at the heart of it, that Todd's brother dies in the plane crash, and then like 2 days later, or however long, Todd dies. And it's like you've deliberately written this so that these parents have lost both their kids, but also it doesn't really want to lend too much time or emotional weight to that stuff as well, because that's not, like you said, that's not what we're here to see, really.
Yeah.
You know. And then it's like, right, now we're settling into the horror. Here it comes. We get like a dark and stormy night. We get the signs start to happen, and we see Todd alone in his bathroom. He's had a shit again, I think, hasn't he? He's been
Yes,
sitting
he
on
has.
the toilet. But you know, as soon as you see a character in a bathroom, you see a shower, and you know, you just know something bad is coming, right? So you've already mentioned, like, was this for you one of your more effective kind of deaths in the film?
Yeah, it was. You know, it's not as big and as bombastic as some of the others, but it's just quite cruel. And
yes,
the way his eyes sort of like dilate or go all bloodshot was the thing that stuck with me as well. And I didn't want that character to die. I remember as a kid watching it, and so yeah, it's a cruel one. It's mean.
I love the build up, like you say, of how is it going to happen. You know, there's a moment when he has some scissors, right, and he's like trimming a nose hair or something, and there's all these different things in the room that you're looking at, and obviously you get the leak of the water, the liquid coming across the floor, which is a kind of recurring motif throughout the film, isn't it? And I guess that links to the plane itself, right? Wasn't there some sort of leak in the plane that caused it to explode or something?
Yes, and it goes along like the pipes, doesn't it? And it takes out 1, 2, 3 before the final explosion happens. Yeah, something like
that's
that.
Right. Something like
Science.
that. Yeah, it is a good moment. Although I do think, I mean, I suppose the point is that it's too slippery, right? But I'm like, can't he just place his feet down on the bathtub and
or like
stop?
use his arms to lift him, like upper body strength, where it's not slippery? I know. I mean, you could just go into all of that, couldn't you? Really?
There are, more than any other death in this movie, there are reasons there are ways he could have got out of that, I feel like. But also, I don't know, I might not have managed to do that. Who knows? You know, it's a shocking situation. And you're right, I think it's done so powerfully with like you say, the eyes going all red and bloodshot, and just how prolonged and sustained it is, that strangling that it is.
And his parents are in the next room.
he can't call out for help. You know, it's a bit of scream in
Yeah.
that, isn't there? Almost that his parents are right there. Yeah, it's good. It's good. It's creepy. I like it. And then this is when we start to realize, oh shit, this is this idea that basically the point of this franchise, right? Which we haven't really talked about, but this idea that if they cheat death, then death is going to come back for them in some way.
It's
right?
going to come and claim them, yeah, because they were supposed to die. Which is such a cool concept.
It is a really cool concept. I love it. What do you think of this kind of visualization of death that we get a little bit of in this film? Like, you know, there are like overtly supernatural things happening in this film, aren't there? Like after Todd dies, the water, the liquid on the floor kind of like reverses back and disappears again across the floor. I almost feel like I could have done without that shot in a way.
Agreed.
I don't know if it needs to be that overtly supernatural. And moments like later where Miss Luton is looking in the teapot and then she sees like a black shadow go swoop past her in the background and stuff.
I
almost don't need that stuff, I think, you know?
Yeah, agreed. Because Todd sees it in the mirror. I think they all do. There's that little black shadow.
Yes.
And I don't think that little black shadow returns for the sequels.
No.
But yes, I like the idea that these could be genuinely accidents. Just really poor luck. And as sort of the more real, the better, I think, especially in this first one. So yes, I agree. I don't think we needed the water reversing or the shadow in the mirror.
And it is great, the concept of it, because it's a bit like Elm Street, where you go, well, fuck, what would I do? How would you get out of that? You know, like we see what Alex tries to do later when he like wears like oven mitts and stuff and only eats food from a tin. But yeah, like, what would you do if this was coming after you? Where would you go?
I don't know. I don't know. Especially like, you know, within the context of the characters when you're a teenager and you don't really have that control over your life. Mm-hmm. Like, where are you going to find a nice padded room with nothing sharp that's going to... But then, is that padded room over a gas main that's going to explode? Or, you know, are you going to run out of oxygen somehow? Or is something that happened 2 weeks ago ultimately going to affect you because you bumped your head? Or, you know, you would go insane trying to cheat it, because I think the whole point of the film is that death is inevitable. You can't cheat it. And it's just when it's going to happen. And it's unfortunate for these characters that they know that it's coming. Mm-hmm. And so our human nature, our human response is to survive. And ultimately, that's why their deaths become so sort of macabre and gross, because, you know, they'd have just gone out in a plane crash, really, and it would be really tragic, and that was what was meant to happen. And then this is like, well, death's a bit annoyed and it's kind of fucking with them.
Exactly. Do you ever think about this kind of stuff yourself, Josh, day to day? Do you think about your own mortality, you know, what around you could kill you? You know, does that stuff ever sort of play on your mind?
No, not in the slightest. I don't think about stuff like that. I mean, I'm a very sensible person. Mm-hmm. Like I don't, you know, 9 times out of 10 I don't do stupid things. And to be honest, there are a couple of moments where you get like severely humbled by the universe. Like I vividly remember almost getting hit by a car on a day where I was like, I look cute, and I'm like strutting through London with my headphones in, like having a lovely time, and then boom, and you're like, oh god, I'm not all that. I'm nothing, you know what I mean? But most of the time, I don't think about that kind of stuff, no.
Crossing a road in London with headphones on is always a dangerous thing, I think, isn't it? It's like, what's going to happen? In fact, if I was going to die in any way from this film, I'd be the one that gets hit by the bus, I think, definitely.
Which best way to go?
Actually, yeah, probably. Nice and quick, right? Yep. That is the next death,
Terry,
isn't it, I believe? Which is so iconic. A truly iconic jump scare. And it's so funny that was the shot that caused all of those marketing reactions with people screaming in the audience. It was this moment, wasn't it? It was the sudden Terry being hit by the bus. And it's so funny, isn't it, these days? I feel like you can see it from a mile off, just the language of film and the language of horror, and having somebody walk backwards into the road like that, you know. And yet, I remember thinking at the time it was such a shock when that happened, you know.
Oh, you guys are all drowning!
Enough! Both of you! They died and we lived! Get over it. I will not let this plane crash be the most important thing in my life! God! I'm moving on. Carter, And if you want to waste your life beating the shit out of Alex every time you see him, then you can just drop fucking dead.
Oh my God, it was. And it was also, we look at that special effect now and it's very ho-hum. But at the time, that we were just starting to get special effects like that of the car accident, because it happens in this and then it happens in, I think it happened a few years before in Meet Joe Black, where Brad Pitt gets hit by the car. And it's the first time we're having these sort of blending of people then going into CGI for the first time. And this one was such a, we forget, but it was such a game changer in regards to its special effects as well. So
yeah, you're right. And actually, it doesn't, because it's so quick, I think it still sort of holds up. You know, it's
really
blink and you'll miss it kind of moment, isn't it? I think, and it's funny. I think this is the difference, right, between this one and Todd. Because you watch Todd and it's kind of like, oh God, you know. And then this one is like a scream followed by a laugh from the audience, right? And even the reactions of the other characters with the kind of blood splats on their face. I think suddenly this is when the movie arrives at, oh, this is what we're doing now, right? Okay,
this is Final Destination. Yeah. It's the switch.
Yes,
and we might dip back a little bit into mean, but even the stuff with Miss Luton is so playful.
Oh. And Miss Luton feels like the trial run for what we get for the rest of the series, I think, right?
Yes.
This really elaborate, funny, playful, prolonged and gross death, right? Where, she's carrying the mug and the mug's cracked and the screen is smoking and this is happening and this is happening.
And the fire chases the blood and follows her around.
And then there's the knife rack and, you know, it is like, it's so extreme and over the top. It was always my favourite scene as a kid, this scene. I loved it. Because also, it was sort of reminiscent of a slasher scene too, right? This house,
because you've got
massive house in the middle of nowhere, a phone call, a knife, you know, it's really playing on all those conventions, I think.
It is, and it ends in such a different way with the chair falling down, and that's what gets her in the end. And I think that's what we end up looking forward to in all the sequels, is looking at every element beforehand to try and figure out how they're going to die and if you get it right or if you get it wrong. And then the filmmakers really toying with those expectations. You know, they know we're going to be watching now, so they then start adding in fake things or misdirections and stuff. And that's where the series sort of finds its groove in regards to its set pieces.
And in a way, you know, it does feel more reminiscent of an 80s slasher than a 90s one, because, you know, we've talked about this before together with, you know, Scream and the movies that came afterwards. It's harping back to that more Halloween style of, you want these characters to live. Actually, often, you know, it's not about the kill, it's about the chase and them getting away or whatever. Whereas I do feel like these movies are a bit more Friday the 13th, in that really you're sort of tuning in to watch these fun deaths happen, aren't you, for the most part, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really interesting how many, when we talk about, you know, sort of late 90s teen horror, how many of these films actually do draw more on the 80s than they do on Scream. Yes, they've got the Scream aesthetic.
Yeah.
They've got, you know, the big flashy cast, and they've got the attempts at that Kevin Williamson dialogue. But things like Urban Legend and Valentine are much more, like in their style and their tone, are much closer to something from the 80s than they are of the 90s. So it's sort of got a mixture of both, really. Because so many people say it's like, actually, it's closer to 80s. And it's like, yeah, they are. Like, then that Scream was kind of, looking back, kind of unique. We got a lot of copycats, but Scream really was its own style, which is why you can sort of see, you know, we still getting movies made now, and they feel very much very within their own subgenre almost.
True. And the body counts for the Scream movies, particularly the first Scream, is much lower than you remember it being, you know, and that's the thing. Yeah, you're right. Whereas these movies are body count movies, basically, aren't they? They are like, we go from A to B to C, you know, who's next kind of thing. Like
we've been reinventing the 80s ever since the 80s, because even if you look the decade that we're about to go into with Final Destination, the 2000s, you know, so many of the remakes were from the late 70s and into the 80s. You know, we just kept redoing that, really. And Scream actually, when you look at it, is sort of an anomaly, and it couldn't really be repeated, even though films like maybe Cabin in the Woods, You're Next, things like that were trying to do
and
so.
I think
anyway,
Final Destination... I
could go on.
I know, we couldn't not talk about Scream in this conversation, though, right? I think that's the other reason why this franchise was particularly successful, because I remember even at the time, and I've spoken so much to people since about, that generation maybe slightly older than us that grew up in the 70s and 80s horror, that didn't love the 90s wave of horror, that thought 90s horror was a bit too restrained and a bit lame and a bit teen-centric. These movies, all of those people still really like the Final Destination movies because they're still filled with gnarly, over-the-top, funny kill scenes, right? And I think it really is an interesting balance of gruesome 2000s and glossy 90s, isn't it, in that regard?
Yeah, it is perfect combo.
What do you think of this whole Alex working out the theory of who dies and when? Because I find this quite confusing. The seating plan, right? And he kind of sketches out this seating plan on the plane and works out who's going to die when. But even listening to him talk it through, I'm like, that didn't work because Alex was next to Todd. So if Todd dies first, shouldn't Alex die next? But Alex moves seats. But I don't think you really have to get it completely because Alex explains it to us. But, that whole thing of who dies next is just hilarious.
Well, it's your check your phone moment, isn't it? It's the film having to be, we have to have this because you can't just have kill scene, kill scene, kill scene. You've got to have, the ebbs and flows, and you've got to have some plot. And they do it in every one. They'll add like a new element that's like, oh, this time it's different. And it's exactly the same, but there's just a slight twist that allows them to give you a little surprise, it's fine. I again loved it as a kid. I was like, oh my God, working it out with him. Like, this is the most intense thing. He's so smart.
Yeah.
And now it's like, okay, cool, great. You've given us just enough information to make it feel like it's a real thing and that there's stakes and there's a potential for them to get out of this situation.
Yes, and the thing of like Alex can intervene, which then means that some people that death skips over them and it goes to the next person, but then at some point it's going to circle back and start again. All of that stuff is just hilarious, and it gets just outrageous in the last like 20 seconds of the film in that regard as well.
Yeah. Who's next?
Yeah.
Is it me or you?
They said the word next about 6 times,
like back to back. Yeah.
I told you were next. It just skipped me. So who's next?
But I do love the sequence in the car. This is where I get to talk about trains.
Your train.
Prepare yourself. But yeah, I do think this is a brilliant moment. And I still, even watching it this week, found that moment genuinely tense. When they stop on the train track and that train is coming at them. It's like classic cinema, this, isn't it? But it's so good. It works so well, I think.
And it's great storytelling as well, because at this point we've had 3 deaths. We know the structure. We know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so there is an assumption that either he's going to get it or something has to change to keep us interested. And that's what happens. And I remember seeing this scene in the trailer constantly. This would be the bit that was sort of, they were really sort of capitalizing on Kerr Smith, I think, because of Dawson's Creek's success. And he was featured quite a lot in the trailer. And I remember this moment being used all the time and being so thrilled to see that he survives and really happy about that. But then you obviously get the
little payoff,
the flip, the payoff with Mr. Hitchcock.
I know, it is great. And this whole, again, what is Carter doing in this scene? So he's suddenly like, I control my life, man, let's do this, and just starts, driving like a maniac and decides they're all going to die before he suddenly changes his mind and goes, it's not my time.
All
but
cocky.
That's fine. We get, yeah, exactly. But it is a good moment. And that train gets so close to the car. I'm like, they wouldn't have made
so close. You barely see them get away as well. It's like, oh God.
It reminds me of the Stand By Me running from the train moment a little bit as well.
Love.
I know. Trains, man.
Trains.
So you can't get... there's no such thing as a bad movie scene involving a train. I'm just saying.
A train. I'm going to find one. I'm going to show it to you.
I'm ready for my lecture on trains. In movies. I'm going to start with the train arriving at a station. I'm going to do that.
You heard it here first, folks.
You heard it here first. And then we get that brilliant payoff with Billy great, fun.
Yeah.
Enjoy that beheading. It's a good graphic beheading as well.
It is, because it goes
Again,
through his mouth. It's like, it's not quite a beheading. Well, it is, but it's like through the jaw.
Yes, and I remember thinking at the time, as somebody that had really only watched the kind of 90s slashes at this point, oh, that's really gruesome.
Yeah.
You didn't usually see stuff like that happen in these sorts of movies,
No, there weren't a lot of beheadings, were there?
No. Loved it. And then that's it, right, in terms of kind of the big sort of set-piece deaths, because then we get the kind of final act where we've got our final three, as death kind of continuously keeps coming for them and not quite managing. How do you think that final act plays out with kind of Clear and him having to save her from all the electricity and all of that stuff?
Yeah, it's fine, but I think it's the middle portion of the film is the most fun, I think, and that's the portion of the film that then gets taken into the sequels. This ending, it's like, well, they're still making a film and they have to wrap up the characters' relationships and sacrifice and all of this. And it's almost like we kind of don't need it, but it sort of has to be there. I must say, I do like all the explosions happening in the house as she's running through it. I think that's really cool. And
that's great.
I just think as an actor, that would have been so fun to film with all those sort of, because they're practical like things blowing up around you and she's doing it all, would be really cool to shoot. And I find electricity quite scary.
There you go. Okay.
So what's going to ground you? How can you get away? Because it's something that you can escape from, but it's like
you've got to be smart.
You've got to be smart very quickly.
Yes.
And so I do enjoy all of that, but it doesn't quite have the scope or the scale of some of the earlier ones. And it's like, it feels a bit weird. Like we get a lot of like running through the woods and he's like trapped under a tree, and suddenly I feel like we're in a bit of a different movie. Like
I know. And also, what is the geography of this town?
Exactly.
As well, because he has to get a boat to her at one point. He's in like a canoe to get to Clear's house. I'm like, where does she live? On like a private island,
on a summer camp somewhere. Yeah, what's going on? Yeah, and that only happens in like the sort of last act of the film. Like everywhere else, we've sort of been in like suburbia or like at the airport and stuff, and then suddenly we're like in a canoe and then in the woods and a tree collapses.
Crystal Lake, like
we are. It feels a little bit like that.
Yeah, it's true. It's fun though. I agree with you. I really liked, because I remember thinking this was often when I would sort of switch off slightly in this final, and once all the cool death scenes, I was so basic. Once all the cool death scenes had finished, I kind of switched off a bit. But I did enjoy it a bit more this time around. I liked, like you said, all the little explosions happening, and because you can tell that this is all practical effects and that Ali Larter genuinely had all that stuff happening around her. It must have been quite creepy. It must have been quite scary, I think, as an actor to have that happening around you. Yeah.
Well, you've had to, I imagine you would have had to, well, you never know, because, it was the year 2000. It was still the dark ages, really, when you look back. But I would imagine and hope that something like that would have been meticulously planned, and like her pathway would have been, really mapped out before they did it. Or they were just like with Freddie Prinze Jr. and I know what he did last summer. Like, just get in this dinghy and do this stunt and jump onto a moving boat. You'll be fine. You won't drown or die. You won't get hit by a propeller.
Oh my God.
If anyone's not heard that story, you can listen to his podcast.
Yes. Terrifying. So, but then Alex comes up with the plan to basically sacrifice himself to save Clear,
Because it'll skip her. If he intervenes, it'll skip her, but he's next.
Right,
and so
that's right. But is he next?
Because at the last minute he realizes that he was originally sat at the back of the plane. And so he moves to right in front of Clear. So he's looking at his little plan going, well, the explosion would have gone this way and I would have been killed before Clear. Right. Which, to be honest, like, just because you're hit by flames first doesn't mean you're going to die first. But anyway, don't overthink it.
But yes, so he decides he's going to sacrifice himself. And this is where we had an original ending of this film, and then they went back and reshot a brand new ending, right, when they realised that they could add sequels. But let's talk about the original ending for a moment, because I didn't really know anything about this until I watched it on YouTube. You can watch the alternate ending on YouTube, which was the original one they filmed. And in that original ending, Alex did die at this moment, right? And it was just Clear and Carter left. And Clear has a baby because she's had sex with Alex in the original cut of the film. and she's now got Alex's baby in this new one.
I mean,
amazing.
It's one of those things that makes sense in a script. Maybe it's like giving life while losing one, and like that's the exchange, and that's how it'll end. Like it's sort of movie logic, but it sort of comes across very corny. And you've got like the floating leaf falling down one day.
Oh, it's so funny.
It's a little corny.
Yeah. This idea that Alex is still with her, right? She's got the baby in the house, and then the window opens, and this like breeze comes in through the window, and she goes, "Alex," and it's all very earnest, and
It's a bit TV movie, isn't it?
it is, isn't it? And there's no kind of like final scare or anything, and it's like it goes back to what we were saying about. This movie hadn't quite got the formula down yet for what it was, and it was still trying to be this quite earnest, serious teen movie at this point, wasn't it?
Yes, and it was still rare and it still is, I guess, to a degree, but it was still rare for mainstream movies to be subversive in that kind of way. Like, yes, you've got your horror movies where there's like that big, like, you know, one last scare or whatever, but it's in a film that is very specifically that, whereas because this, you can see it trying to be more of a thriller, more something along the lines of, I'm trying to think of like, I don't know, like there's just an element of it that feels like Murder by Numbers and The Bone Collector.
Yeah.
And, like it's not, but like it's got that sort of thriller 2000s aesthetic to it that like maybe they were trying to lean into that kind of style and make it a bit more sophisticated and more intelligent.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it almost goes back to Seven, doesn't it? That, you know,
Seven, yes, exactly.
Seven, which was such an influential film in the mid 90s, and even the opening credits. And yeah, you're right. You know, this idea of this kind of linear kind of working out of bodies piling up one by one. It feels a bit.
There's
Seven.
a procedural element to it that I think is the X-Files element.
Yes.
I guess.
Yes. That's right. I guess that's what X-Files nailed. That kind of procedural FBI drama with something supernatural, which is exactly what this film is, I guess. So yeah, you're right. You know, it wasn't. It didn't know it was a slasher franchise, maybe, at this point. Right?
No, it desperately didn't want to be, did it?
It didn't want to be, which I love. But, of course, they then did reshoot the ending to make it much more of this is part one of a slasher franchise, right? Which is where suddenly we jump to a bunch of months later. Alex is still alive. He's fine. He survived that electric shock. And
Everyone's very perky and blonde.
Everyone looks amazing. Like they suddenly...
Everyone's had a glow up.
Yeah, that's always a thing as well, isn't it, in these? And they finally made the trip to Paris, and they go for a little beer together in Paris. And then, of course, shit goes down when it turns out that death is still after them, which is interesting in itself because it's like, well, 3 months or 6 months have passed. Has it not been coming for you this whole time?
What was Death doing?
Yeah,
what was Death
just
doing?
having a bit of downtime. Busy.
Yeah.
Other people to kill.
Busy with other people.
They thought it would be funnier to wait until they're in Paris to do this.
Yeah. For the tragic irony that they got there and then immediately died.
But I love that they've all had a glow up and now look like teen stars, like models, and also Carter and Alex are just like bezies now, absolute
best
bezies.
mates. Everyone's super perky, super chill. It's only 6 months, and yet everyone's like skipping around, like this incredibly bizarre, tragic event didn't happen to them that very year.
I know, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the fact that they're all in Paris having a lovely time, given that all of their classmates died trying to make this trip to Paris, you know.
Right, and they're like, earlier. We made it.
Yeah.
We made it.
We made it.
We got to have the trip of a lifetime.
So good. And then these brilliant little surprise endings with signs collapsing and traffic, and again, it's just like a really fun little sequence, isn't it, of just like, and it's so quick you almost don't have time to overthink it. This idea that,
like
oh my god, it's coming for
almost.
Alex, oh my god, Alex survived it, oh my god, who's next, oh, Carter, and then end, right? And it's just like, okay, fine. It's a bit of fun, isn't it?
It is, and I think it's that split of tone. You know, you've just had this sort of dramatic finale, and we're like going towards a white light, and then the white light just becomes the airport, and we get this kind of fun, silly ending. So, but I like the ending, actually. I think it's
fun.
It sets the tone for the sequels for sure.
It really does. Is Carter dead, do we think?
Yeah.
Did Carter die? Yeah. He deserved to anyway. He was a dickhead.
I think Carter and Alex do die.
That's right. Spoiler alert, because Alex is not in the sequel, is he?
No, he's not.
That's
Which kind of bummed me out a little bit, because he was the character that I related to.
And I think if it was in the sequels, we would have seen Carter die. Like, it would have ended with his head coming off, right? And then it would have cut to credits. That's much more like how the sequels
it would have been
go.
shot in 3D, and the head would have flown at the camera,
and then
that's how it would have gone to black.
By James Wan. Yeah, exactly. Exactly that.
What do you think? So, just a random thing about the characters.
Yeah.
I really struggle to get a grasp of their ages. I said earlier that Todd and Alex feel really young.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it's like they're having their beers and she's got her red wine and it feels like really sophisticated and they're probably still 18.
Well, yes, absolutely. I'm assuming they are seniors in high school, right? So 18 probably. Which means they're legally old enough to drink in France, but not in America, right? So yeah, I guess they're still 18, but yeah, the gap, the difference, the growth,
because the vibe feels the vibe feels weird as well. Like when they have that scene before Terry gets hit by the bus, it's like you're not at school. It feels like they've graduated, and it's like a couple of years later. You know,
you're right. Actually, they're all just like sitting in a cafe, and again, it's the way they talk to each other in that scene in particular, right? And you know, Terry going, "I will not let this thing define my life," and all this stuff. Like it is. Yeah, it's just so sub Kevin Williamson. It is basically.
Yeah, it is. It's like no, teens in the 90s are smart. Teens in the 80s were dumb. But in the 90s, we're clever. Like, we don't get naked, but we have existential conversations with very, bountiful amounts of syllables. You know?
So good. The difference in dialogue between this and, Halloween, where it's like, I always forget my history book. And
who needs books? Books.
None of that in this movie. I love it. Well, there you go. That's Final Destination. What's your favorite kill? What's your favorite set piece in the first film, Josh?
My favorite set piece is... It's the teacher.
It's Mrs. Luton, isn't it?
No, it's the train.
Oh.
It's got to... Oh, I don't know. They're so good. Is it the train? I think the best death is hers because it's just so brutal and so gory.
Yeah, agreed.
But the train's fun, because it's really suspenseful.
Agreed. The train is the best sustained tension, isn't it? Definitely. Yeah. But you're right. The best kill is definitely Luton. I love it. And how long has it been? Like, just out of interest, if I was to ask you for your rankings of the 5 films, do you remember roughly the rest of the movies, and where would you rank them?
Currently, having not seen them for a while, and it pains me because I do love this one, and it was my favourite for so long, but I think my ranking is 2, 1, 5, 3, 4.
2, 1, 5, 3, 4. Yeah, I think I'm exactly the same. That is exactly what I've got in my head going into this franchise, that 2 is the best, 5 is definitely up there, and 4 is the worst. But I've pretty much only seen all of them, apart from the second one I've seen a bunch of times, but the rest, 3, 4, and 5, I've only ever seen once, so I'm excited to go back and revisit.
And a lot of people yell at me because 3 is their favourite.
Oh, people love 3.
People love 3.
I don't think it's as good as 2 or 5. I think you're right. It's not as good, but I know people love the roller coaster sequence. I think that's what it is. Yeah,
and they love the tanning beds and those girls. I think 3's big with the gays.
Right. There is something that's quite it's a bit campier and more colourful.
It's very colourful and a bit campier. Yeah.
Yes. You're
and
right.
I think 3. I don't know when it was. It 2006 that it came out.
Yeah,
I think.
about that. Yeah,
that's hitting peak new generation of horror fans as well.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
And also it was a sort of, having something a bit fun and colourful in the glut of like greeny brown 2000s horror movies that we were getting. It was probably quite welcomed for a certain a certain audience, right, at that time.
And the first 2 hit that weird transitional period where we've not quite had Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake yet. We've not had, we're in that like sort of in between period. So, and I think 3 sort of hits it like boom. We're right in the middle of Saw. We're right in the middle of it, all the remakes. So, I think that's probably why it's well regarded amongst people too.
Let me finish by asking you, what is the future of this franchise? It brought the series to a lovely end, it feels like, after part 5. And I think there's been talks quite a lot since then, of resurrecting it, of rebooting it, or whatever. Do you think that this series might ever return?
Yeah, I think it absolutely could. I think there's a limitless potential for it. And I think with, it's a bit of an eye roll, but with social media and with technology and with, there's a way to go about it like that. There's also a way. I was watching this and I was thinking, like, what's another film that completely put a twist and a subversion on the slasher movie? And it got me thinking about It Follows. And wouldn't it be cool to do a real sort of intimate, dark, scary version of Final Destination in that kind of way, where death is sort of following them, and that the deaths are really cruel and brutal, and it's not funny, it's not played for comedy. Could be a real a way to go with it, perhaps. Or they just go big and splashy, and there's so many ways.
Yes. Because I was thinking, I would love that. I would love to see a kind of scary It Follows-esque kind of version of this. But I was thinking it could also be done quite well by somebody like Christopher Landon, who made the Happy Death Day movies. I feel like they could lean that way, a kind of give it a Blumhouse, reboot with somebody like Christopher Landon, who, again, Happy Death Day was a kind of very fun twist on the slasher format as well, wasn't it?
And there's no reason why we can't go a little bit multiverse with this as well, and bring in, like, it could go real sci-fi too, and you could bring in actors from earlier installments. You could get Devon Sawa back, but he's like a different version of him or something, or maybe he's the Tony Todd character. Like, if we're doing requels and legacy sequels, then there's potential for that as well in this sort of
I'd love that
era that we're in.
I'd love a kind of butterfly effect time travel version of Final Destination. So if you went back,
very butterfly effect, isn't it?
If you went back and stopped somebody from dying in a previous film, then what knock-on effect would it have on who dies from that point?
Okay, so here's my concept then. You've got Chris Landon that did Happy Death Day to You. In Happy Death Day to You, it involves time travel. So there's a way that maybe we could do a Final Destination thing involving the characters from Happy Death Day.
Oh, this is our new Halloweens, basically.
It is.
I love
and let's throw in Freaky as well, because everyone was talking about a crossover. Freaky Happy Death Day, Happy Freaky Death Day, something like that.
Yeah, let's throw in a body swap as well.
Yeah.
I love it. Loved Freaky. Yeah. What?
Oh my God, one of the characters swaps bodies with death and has to kill their friends.
I'd like to see Tony Todd playing like a teenage girl, if like he body swaps with a teenage girl.
Yeah, that'd be amazing.
There we go. There's our pitch. I love it. Amazing. Well, Josh, thank you very much for joining me to discuss this movie. I've loved it. And just tell people where they can find you and more of your stuff online.
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd, just at Joshua Tonks. I've got a tweet that's doing numbers at the moment.
Hey! What's the tweet that's doing numbers?
Oh, it's so stupid. It's literally just me posting a photo of my letterbox, and it's all the movies. It starts with like The Craft and Scream and ends with Swim Fan, and everyone's like, oh my God, this is my era. And I'm like, I know!
That's the most Josh tweet of all time.
It is.
And it's a list of like 90s teen movies.
And it's shown in the likes. But then you get the people that are like, yeah, but what about Wild Things? You missed off. And I'm like, I can't fit them all in.
No. And also,
I can't have like 21.
That's different. It doesn't
different
quite
vibe.
count. Different vibe.
I
love it. Wow.
So funny. But yeah.
I'm going to go check out that tweet and like it immediately. Josh, thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
And that's it for part one of our Final Destination retrospective. Thank you all so much for listening. One more time, a big thank you to the brilliant Joshua Tonks. We'll be back tomorrow to discuss 2 Final Destination movies. I'll be joined by Kia Seward and Alex Austin, and we will be discussing Final Destination 2 and Final Destination 3. Join us tomorrow for another bonus episode of The Evolution of Horror.